Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Take Back My Brain. I am your host, Lori Hammer, and I am excited today to bring you Dr. Jeff Crippen. And he is from Texas. He is a chiropractor, and he's also a wellness coach, a nutritionist, and so much more.
One of
Yeah.
the things that I think is fascinating is gentleman Weston A. Price. You may
Yes.
be familiar with his work, right? So
Yes. Great work.
he traveled the world basically in the 20s and 30s and went to I think 16 different countries back when that was, wasn't as easy as hopping on a flight and taking a direct
Yeah.
flight, right? And he basically looked at native cultures and their diet, and he was studying dental disease. He actually wrote about a 700-page textbook on dental disease.
Mm-hmm.
And then his son had dental problems, and he realized, well, I know everything about disease, but I don't know how to keep teeth healthy.
Right.
So that's how he started studying it. So he went around the world kind of studying that. And what he found was there was no magic diet,
Mm-hmm.
right? In the plains of Africa, they ate different than the Maui in New Zealand, which ate different than they did in the Scottish Highlands. And he just would go around the world, and there was no single diet. But what he found is each one of those diets has somewhere between 2 and 10x the nutrients
Mm.
required to sustain life.
Right.
Somewhere, like the Inuit up in Alaska were largely, what almost now what we consider carnivore, right?
Right.
But a lot of fat and definitely keto, right?
Mhm.
To something that we're largely, or 80%, 90% vegetarian and
Right.
pretty much anything in between. But I think what was interesting about that was none of them studied nutrition,
No.
right? We don't see evidence that, and we actually have people who studied nutrition that don't
Mhm.
understand it nearly as well as any of these native cultures that individually developed, and they were dropped in wherever part of the world they were born, and they
Mhm.
found a diet that had everything they needed to sustain life.
Yeah.
So sometimes when we try to go from, the mental side of our brain, uh, you know, it depends. If you get the right knowledge in there, you're going to get healthier. But
Right.
there's a lot of garbage in, garbage out. And there's a lot of, uh, I'd say, counter effort or resistance to try to learn nutrition because,
Yeah.
there's a good profit motive for a lot of companies keeping people sick.
Yeah, sadly, sad but true.
Yeah.
So how do we filter that? How do we decide, what is the best diet for us?
Yeah. So I think one is you can start by looking at a good practitioner. Two is you can look at blood works and through functional ranges, right? I
Hmm.
think it's looking at like, you know, what's your protein on the blood work, right? And we can
Yep.
tighten up that range, and maybe 6.9 to 7.4 is what I might look at there. Or you can look at serum iron and ferritin as markers of iron status in the body, and you can recognize that, hey, if I'm an endurance athlete or a cycling female, then my new needs are going to be different, right?
Hmm.
The other thing I think is understanding the unique stresses we are under in the body, right? Because where does stress hit someone? Does it hit them in the heart, right, so to speak?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Does it hit them in the thyroid? Does it hit them
Yeah.
in the body? And then understanding what nutrients those organs need, and then rebuilding it piece by piece. And that's by the nature of it's not one size fits all. It's a little hard to give a blanket recommendation,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the signpost that you should see on that is that you feel better on that healing journey. And so we
Yeah.
could talk through some examples, but I think but the first step I think you hit on earlier, which is awareness, right? It's
Hmm.
just looking at that. And it's
Yeah.
hard at the beginning because we might be quite accustomed to eat, go, and we're doing six other things before we've even digested the food, right? But
Yeah.
just sitting down and beginning to have that awareness, and then opening up the question, how'd you feel after that meal?
Hmm.
Better, worse, or the same? And I think awareness starts slowly, right? But just opening up that awareness to how did I feel after this, you know, better, worse, or the same. And then you start tracking that, and then you can start getting curious on what is your body feeling better. Because some people will do better closer to a vegetarian diet, and some people will do closer to a keto diet. And some people do better with high protein. Some people do a low
Yeah.
protein. Some people do fasting. I mean, there is a lot of uniqueness. I think there's definitely some principles for a great diet that do transcend no matter what kind of style of eating someone's doing. But
Yeah.
that uniqueness is something that I think if we can embrace and be open to. So I think it starts with awareness. It starts with awareness of ourselves, and it starts with, and the second part would be some guidance of, practitioner maybe like yourself that can point out, hey, let's try this, or use their knowledge to supplement what you're doing there.
Right. Right. So I know that some people are going to say, well, how do I know like it's a self-assessment, or what is, something in me that's driving a food craving that wouldn't be healthy. Like, gee, I really want those McDonald's French fries. Is that
Yeah.
really what my body needs? Or gee, I
Yeah.
really want the next sugar fix.
Yeah.
When people come to see me, we're balancing the brain so they don't have those craving signals, so that they can hear,
Yeah.
um, what their body is saying. But if somebody's not in that place to come see a practitioner like me that does that, how do we determine the difference between, say, a bad craving and what our body actually needs?
Oh, good. If it's from McDonald's, you're not correct.
Right? You
It's
shouldn't go
not what you
there
need.
ever.
Exactly. Exactly.
Never
So
do
we'll just
that.
make that, we'll make that simple.
Yeah.
The idea of, a lot of people will crave sugar, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think the average consumption in the US is just over 102 pounds a year. 100
It's
years
just
ago, it was
crazy.
between, yeah, it's
Because you and
some,
I are
it's
not
some,
eating that. So somebody's eating our share.
exactly. So that's 200 pounds for someone, or 180
Yeah.
pounds for someone, depending on where that is. So exactly. So, um, I think so what I found effective to reconnect people to that is some kind of, like a purification program or a cleanse.
Oh,
Just
yeah. That's so
sometimes
good.
you just have to press the
Mhm.
reset button. We
Yeah.
have to take all the junk out and get real foods in for about 3 weeks. And then once you do that, what I've seen is, people, oh, wow, I didn't realize I like this vegetable. Oh, I didn't realize I feel that way. So sometimes if you're at the point where I'm craving French fries and I think that's what my body needs, sometimes it's like, okay, when you're ready, this is the next step. Cut it
Right.
all out for 3 weeks, get on a whole food diet, and then see what that feels like. And then you build from there. That's what I found, because that's what I found is effective, is just doing a hard reset at that point when the person's ready.
Oh, yeah. No, it's so worth it. So worth it to take all that
Yeah.
food out. Yeah. Because then you, even just smelling it, you're like, oh, I can't believe I
Yeah.
ate that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. And then you'll see that. And absolutely. And as you know, you'll see incredible sensitivity to sugar. Like you have like a little bite of something that you ate before. Like, oh my
Hmm.
gosh, this is so sweet. I can't even eat this, blah, blah, blah. Or I can't even drink this old coffee that I used to do. Now I have a sip and it's almost too much, because you totally reset the sensitivities of the
Yep.
body.
Yeah. My daughter's a baker and she does allergen friendly baking.
Oh,
And
great.
we're so low in sugar at our house. Like, so like, berries are super sweet to us.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so when she's doing like a buttercream frosting on this, allergen friendly cake, she has me try it, and she tries it. And we always like, we have to just intuitively just add more something to it, sweetener to it, because we know that what's sweet to us is going to just taste like butter to somebody else. So, and, that's after years of changing your diet. And
Yeah.
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 So,
And it's a journey to start, but yeah, it's a journey and it's a process to go there, but one that's super, super worthwhile and will pay off. But like you said, it can be a stark, and it can happen quick. Like it can
yeah.
happen in
Yeah.
weeks, and it can, you can maintain it for years like you've done, which is great, but it can happen quick, and you can kind
Yeah.
of get back to that point and be amazed at what you did a month ago is how different that is from now.
Oh, yeah. 21 days, it can do magic on so
Mhm.
many things. I see it
Sure.
happen all the time. It's incredible. How, when you're trying, do you have a family, Jeff? I guess we never talked about that.
I am no, I just got married about a month and a half ago.
Oh,
So
congratulations.
just at the beginning of that process, but
Yeah.
just no kids yet.
No kids, yeah, because that's where I hear a lot. Like, okay, so I
Yeah.
can change my diet, but I can't change my family's diet because they are going to
Yeah.
scream at me. What do you
Yeah.
tell your patients?
Yeah, that's great. So, yeah, honestly, that's a tough conversation, because often the person I'm having the conversation with is mom,
Absolutely.
and and you know, I do my best to hear them for where they are, because it's a what I want to tell them is your 4 year old's not driving to the grocery store,
Right.
so unless they learn to drive, if you don't buy it, they're not going to eat it. Obviously, there's
Mhm.
school and there's daycare and there's so
Yeah.
it's not the whole story, but trying to meet someone where they're at. So I'll go as far as that, to as close as, well, let's find some more natural alternatives. So let's do a stevia based soda if they're
Mhm.
absolutely, love it,
Yeah.
instead
Yeah.
of, a name brand Coca-Cola, Pepsi, something like that. So natural alternatives up to the point of, sometimes, hey mom or hey dad, like, you guys are in control of this. And what you run into is, some of their own thoughts and beliefs
Mhm.
about food, how their parents raised them,
Yep.
whether food was a reward for them, whether food was a punishment for them, whether certain foods they couldn't have, whether they don't want to replicate those experiences with their kids.
Yeah.
So there's a tremendous amount of empathy and listening to the parent to try to find out, where does this come from? Does it come from a place of overwhelm? Does it come from a place of stress? Does it come from a place of wanting to give their children choice and allow them to experience it, and trying to find the right path between where they are now and a more optimum diet? And so sometimes it's a combination of healthy substitutions, the stuff that maybe we all know, which is like, okay, let's start with a healthy fat and a protein and a vegetable before we get into that stuff. So even if
Yeah.
we have a bite of sugar, it's not going to spike the blood sugar, not quite have sets of negative effects it would if we start out with a solid base.
Yeah.
Um, and also, finding the right balance to gently position the mom or the dad, like, you know, it's their choice on how they want to run it, but they have the knowledge. Once they have the knowledge on how this affects their kids, it's up to them how they choose to use that, right? Which isn't an easy
Yeah.
conversation. It's not easy when you're, a parent going through the grocery store and your kid's screaming down an aisle. You used to take them down before, or they're coming home from daycare and they get it there, but now all of a sudden they can't get it from the house. So they get it
Yeah.
at their friend Mikey's house, right? And they
Right.
can't get it at your house anymore. So it's not an easy conversation, but just like that 3-week reset will reset a lot of the cravings for the parent, it will do the same thing for the kids, and the stuff
Yeah.
they used to crave will go down and down. And it gets easier as you go on, but you got to be committed to it at the beginning. In those
Yeah.
first 3 days to 3 weeks is going to be a transition period that's, may not be fun.
Right. Yeah, completely. I want to
Yeah.
swing back around to your chronic pain.
Yeah.
And we're talking about nature's perfect food, listening to the body. I would love for you to dive into how food plays into chronic pain issues.
Yeah. Good. So when I see somebody that's got some chronic pain, obviously, what's underlying that, some inflammation, right? What you
Mhm.
don't know immediately is what's causing the inflammation.
Right.
So, one of the things we look at is obviously omega-3s being a great source of that. We'll use a test called the omega-3 index to look
Yep.
at their omega-3 status and use that as a marker for where they're at. And then, you know, look at the herbal anti-inflammatories and things like turmeric, frankincense, ginger,
Yeah.
things like that have the preventative, or can calm down that inflammation. But inflammation, I was just having this conversation with someone in the office on Saturday, which is like, inflammation in itself doesn't tell you why the body's inflamed.
Right.
So you got to kind of be a detective. Why is that body inflamed? Is there an underlying infection? Is there a food allergy? Is there a heavy metal toxicity? Is
Hmm.
there a chemical exposure? And kind of go looking for that.
Right.
Um, we could go a couple different directions. Like with headaches specifically, there's a couple organ systems. The thing about the headache is, if you and I have a headache, it's probably got a different reason. And if a
Right.
high school football player gets one right after a game, that's probably something different. And if a college person gets one on a Sunday morning after night drinking, that's probably something else,
Yes.
right? And you can have a sinus headache, and you can have a woman around her cycle, right? And you can go through all these different reasons that headache exists, to sinus pressure. So it takes a little skill to find out what that is, but there are some things that can be useful, for pain relief. So we can look on the herbal side. We might look at something like California poppy, can be quite useful, for pain relief. Sometimes valerian, Jamaican dogwood are a couple herbs that can be helpful for that. Something that's really just been phenomenal is, there's a fat soluble chlorophyll product
Hmm.
on the market. And what they found is, and what I found in my office, I'll tell you what I found, and then some experience from others, is about 60 to 70% of patients with pain can chew up some of this fat soluble chlorophyll and have the pain get markedly better or go away within 15 to 30 minutes.
Really?
So it's just, yeah. And I've seen it with, um, like sciatica pain down the back, people who just had a tooth extracted,
Hmm.
to kind of anything in between. So it can be quite useful on that. And the theory behind is it neutralizes something that's very alkaline in the body called guanidine, which stimulates the pain receptors. So
Yeah.
that can be one useful thing to do in the body. But ultimately, and then there's, salicylic acid, which is, kind of the comes from white willow bark. So there's certain things you can do pain wise. And I think that's useful and helpful.
Yeah.
But ultimately always looking for what is that underlying cause, what's driving that pain to try to help the patient.
Right. Right. And what do you use to dig for that to decide what the underlying cause is?
So a lot of what we're using in the office is something called kinesiology or muscle testing.
Yep.
So what we're doing is we're using, an indicator muscle in the body, not to see how strong they are, but to find out where there's energy and where there's not in different organ systems of the body.
Mhm.
And then specifically finding out what food, nutrient, herb will rebuild the body and strengthen that. So that's a large point
Okay.
of what we do. And then outside of that, just a good history will sometimes tell you a
Yeah.
lot. I remember I had a young boy came in with just rashes all over his body, and he had had 3 different surgeries in his ear and was
Wow.
on his way for a 4th surgery to put tubes in his ear.
Hmm.
And they couldn't find out what was going on. And he was like a, high school kid. So it's kind of like embarrassing to
Yeah.
have that stuff there. And they were just kind of at a loss. So they came in, and anytime I see like a rash on the body, especially one that moves around or had been there a while, a lot of times it points to gut, often
Yeah.
fungal or parasitic.
Yep.
And so I was doing a history and talking to him, and it started 1 month after the family got a lake house, and he jumped and swam in this pool, or jumped and swam in a lake, which wasn't clean at all. I said, okay, well, before you told me that story, I thought it was a parasite, and now I kind of know what it
Really think
was.
it's
So we,
parasite?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then like, oh, it makes sense. And, he had been on, 16 different rounds of medications and
Oh,
antibiotics and just all kinds of stuff. But anyway, cleaned up the gut, and within 2 weeks, he was much better and the rash went away. So sometimes with a good history, you don't even need
yeah.
that to say, this makes sense. What do we know about the lake? What do we know about that? Oh, and by the way, he had a perforated eardrum when he jumped in the lake. So that was the
Oh,
pathway in. And
pathway in. Yeah.
he had swollen lymph node the size of a golf ball in
Oh,
his neck. He went back 5 days later. I could have already scheduled before he came to see me, and they went back and they said, I don't know why you're here. We can't find any evidence of the swelling of the lymph node. And they were
uh-huh.
just floored because it'd been there for like, 18 months at that point, but happened to
Wow.
go away. But so
Yeah.
anyway, sometimes with the right history and the right question, you can really just spot it there. But outside of that, the muscle testing and the blood work are the other signs we use to kind of support that.
Yeah. I love that. We do that too. So
Yeah.
that's,
Oh,
that's
that's
amazing.
awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, what would you like to tell the audience, like before we sign off here, like one last thing about nature's perfect food or headaches or whatever you want to say?
Well, I'll tell you that the way the way um I'll tell you the way I close the book is the story with and I think this is the story I'd like to leave them with was there's a story of um back in between Burma and Siam, which is now Myanmar and Thailand. There was there was about 11 or 13 wars over 150 years. And what I tell you that to say about 50 years ago, they were moving a statue of Buddha. And one night they were moving it to a bigger temple. It started to rain while they were moving it. They were using pulleys to lift it up. And one night the pulley cracked, or the pulley snapped. The statue fell and cracked. And the head
Hmm.
monk came out with a flashlight. And there's this terracotta statue, but all of a sudden he found something shiny in it. And he didn't know what it was. So they went to bed, came out the next morning, and he found it shined, which didn't make sense. So what they did is the next day they chipped away the terracotta, and they found the statue wasn't made of terracotta, but it was made of 8.5 tons of gold.
Oh my gosh.
And what happened was the Burmese were famous for melting down all the gold of the statues when they conquered him. So this statue was hidden. Everybody who knew about it was killed in the war. And 150 years later, this statue still sat there covered in terracotta without knowing what was really inside. And I think each of us is like that statue with the gold, this golden healing force within us. Each of us is gold in the center, right? This
Right.
incredible
Yeah.
vitalistic healing ability. And sometimes these cracks, these bumps, these illnesses can be a pain, they can be problematic, they can be hurtful, they can be painful, but sometimes they hit us just right and they help us unlock step into and find just that little bit of gold inside of us. And if we can nurture that and lean into that, sometimes these illnesses, these things we're dealing with, these symptoms can end up being an incredible blessing and be an opportunity for growth,
Mhm.
enlightenment, you know, personal growth, helping us become more spiritual, becoming us more ourselves. So that would be the lesson I would live, is look for that glint of gold in that experience you're going through and
Yeah,
follow it till you become more yourself.
I love it. That's fantastic, Jeff. Thank you so much. It's been a great conversation. I appreciate you being here.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Laurie.
All
Pleasure to be
right.
with you as well.
Yeah. Thank you everyone for listening. Make sure that you are your own health advocate and that you take back your brain. And I will see you in the next episode.